All right, so now we're going into the integumentary system, which is essentially the skin. So you'll learn more about this in anatomy and physiology, but essentially your skin is multiple layers. You have the epidermis, dermis, and then what's called the hypo or subdermis. All right. Within the epidermis, you're going to find multiple other layers of cells, and we won't be going into that here. Also, as part of the integumentary system, the hair within the skin, sweat glands, and certain sensory neurons that are involved in touch, temperature, etc., are all part of integument function. So again, you'll see a further breakdown here. So functions of the integumentary system: it's going to protect from the environment against fluid loss. It's going to produce vitamin D via a process involving light. It's going to help regulate body temperature. So remember, it is able to sweat, and it's also essentially another layer in the cold. It's going to excrete waste. So most people don't realize this, but the skin, when you sweat, there is urea within the skin. And again, urea is nitrogenous waste. There's also other types of wastes as well. And it's going to provide sensory information. That's going to be light touch, heavy touch, pressure. Even the hairs on your skin serve a role in sensory. All right. So acro or acro is for extremities. Cutaneo is skin. Dermo, again, another term for skin. Dermato is skin. Myco is fungus, so like a fungal infection. Onycho is nail. Cyano, blue. Erythro, red, like erythrocytes. Leuco, white, like leukocytes. Melano is black, like melanocytes, and melanocytes are what produces melanin and gives skin its pigment. Xantho is yellow. So suffixes A, E, and Y, these actually are going to have no meaning. Itis is a very common one. It signifies inflammation. Osis is a generic suffix indicating a non-normal condition or status. Ois is pertaining to. Tomi is a cut or incision. Prefix is epi. Epi means upon. Okay. Hypo is below or deficient. Intra will be within. Per is through. Sub is again below. And this can be used as both a directional and measurement type term, but you tend to see certain words going either hypo or sub. Trans, which means through. So full words here: cutaneous, again, is the skin. Dermal, pertaining to the skin. Dermatitis, inflammation of the skin. Dermatologist, a specialist that specializes in the skin. Dermatology is the study of the skin. Dermatopathologist is somebody who studies pathologies of the skin. Dermatopathy is a condition relating to the skin. And then epidermal is upon the skin. So remember the epidermal layer. It's upon the dermis. Okay, so you'll see more terms here. So what we see here, these are not built from word parts. Abscess, there's basal cell carcinoma, which is a type of cancer. There's biopsies. Biopsies are basically taking a sample of tissue to study. Edema, which is essentially just swelling. A laceration, which is essentially just a cut. And then a lesion. So what you'll see here, example of what basal cell carcinoma can look like. There's ulcers, squamous cell carcinoma, and then two things you see here, Staphylococcus and Streptococcus. These are bacterial families, okay? Two of the most common infectious bacteria, yet they're also part of our body's normal bacteria flora. So this is a pressure ulcer, squamous cell carcinoma, and you can see examples of very basic drawings of what these bacteria tend to look like. So words that reference to color. So erythema is going to mean redness. Jaundice is a yellow tinge to the skin or other mucous membranes, and pallor is pale. All right, so we're going through abbreviations again. These were outlined previously on the slides. So again, looking here, remember back to the generic outline of the bacteria. So again, abbreviations. RBC is an erythrocyte or red blood cell. WBC is a leukocyte or white blood cell. BX is a biopsy. And then MRSA. MRSA is a fun one because it is a methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus. So this is a bacteria. Now, this specific bacteria is a nightmare because it is resistant to antibiotics. Everybody has heard of MRSA. It's one of the most common nosocomial infections, as in it's very common to get an infection in a healthcare environment. And this is actually because MRSA has essentially evolved due to overuse of antibiotics. So as Staphylococcus aureus divides and multiplies, the Staphylococcus aureus that essentially contains mutations in its genetics or has inherited certain aspects to it that allow it to survive antibiotics, those will survive, and then they continue to divide, and then you end up with essentially situations with bacteria like MRSA, which is a very specific, essentially subcategory of Staphylococcus aureus. Antibiotic resistance has a lot of components to it, but that's the most basic idea behind it. So we already know this by now, but most terms are Latin or Greek based. So you'll see some suffixes that indicate singular versus plural. This is just something that you'll have to learn, and it's going to take practice. Okay, so this general idea, though, applies here where you see the full word. So a bursa versus bursa. All right. It's, again, something you'll just have to learn. And some of these you'll never really ever experience, like appendix versus appendices. Most people only have one appendix. So for the most part, you're never going to be referencing multiple appendices. So onto the Greek suffixes. Again, the same idea kind of applies here. Metastasis, you'll see that if there's like multiple cancers that have spread. Ganglion versus ganglia. A ganglion is like a bundle of nerves, and they serve different purposes throughout the body and are incredibly important. But the plural is ganglia, so you actually have like a sympathetic chain of ganglia throughout the thorax and abdomen, just next to the vertebrae, right? But again, some of these like pharynx or pharynges, you're not going to ever really experience needing to talk about them in a plural situation.